Hey everybody, welcome back to Swerve with your host Brett Evans. Today's lecturette is called It's Their Language. And this is just to kind of plant some seeds for things that are coming. But this phrase, it's their language, when referring to the English language, and their meaning, the people of the actual country of England. A lot of times it's used as a pejorative. It's their language, like, speaking about this is the language of the colonizers. Now, here's one thing that's stupid. Just one. If you go to the art museum now in City Park, near the museum to the right, going up the main entrance that once upon a time was painted blue like the Nile River for the King Tut exhibit. Ask your parents or grandparents. There is a sculpture that just says NOLA 300. So commemorating the 300th anniversary of the city of New Orleans, but it's NOLA 300. Now, why is that dumb? Because nobody used the phrase NOLA even 20 years ago in speech to refer to the city, right? You would write it on an envelope. Here, see, an envelope. You would write NOLA, but nobody would say, hey, when are you going to be back in NOLA? That's only a very recent thing. So 300 years ago, absolutely, that was no such thing. And then, of course, before this city was in English, New Orleans, it was La Nouvelle Orleans in French. And what you need to note there is the La is female, so the city is female. But even before that, the native peoples of this area, as we'll see later, called this place Bolbancha. So when the New Jerseys come out next year for the Bolbancha Pelicans and the helmets for the Bolbancha Saints, you'll know where that's coming from. So yeah, if you go back 400 years, there was nobody in southern Louisiana that was, speaking English. Now, that being the case, I just want to say, even obviously people from all different parts of the world, that's true. In my particular case, even, the Spanish side of my family is from Barcelona, so they obviously spoke Spanish. I do have the name Evans is Welsh. Don't worry, I'm not going to geek out on any kind of genealogy stuff, but basically that name is Welsh, which is close to England, but not. A big part of my family is Cajun French, right? And obviously they spoke French and an antique form of French. My grandmother, when I was young, I remember I brought home French books from class, and she looked at those books and it struck something deep in her because she was seeing French for the first time in a long time, and it may have been the first time she had ever seen proper, French written out and not the Cajun French. But the generation after her in Southwest Louisiana, people were forbidden to speak French in school, even on the playgrounds, anywhere. So they pretty much beat the Cajun language, the French language, out of everybody because they wanted everybody to speak English. Okay. Now, that being the case, you might have noticed somewhere in that, if you watch the Mike Douglas special with Muhammad Ali, somewhere in there, he, is talking about maybe it's their language type of idea. The English is the language of the oppressor. And then the funny thing about that, though, is maybe this is one of those, love the one you're with kind of thing, because Muhammad Ali, of course, even that being the case, was so eloquent in the English language. He's already bionic in English. One can only imagine if he could go into other languages as well. But all that being said, this seems like a little grim to this point, but it's leading up to some good news. The good news is most of what you guys have been doing in your post and different things has been really well written and thoughtful. You're using English at a pretty high level. So even though this isn't any of our first languages, ultimately, that's a good thing. I wanted to circle back for a second and say, like, I have a friend, Gianna, who's a good friend of mine from New Orleans, and she always identified herself as Creole. I mean, she is, a woman of color, and when we think of Creole, it usually would, people would think that means African combined with French and or Spanish. But she actually did one of those DNA, test type of things. And it came back that she was a much higher percentage of actual English than she, could have possibly imagined. So, ironically, my Creole friend is probably one of my most English friends, other than my friends who are actually from England and they know who they are. So, point being, it's their language, but we're doing a pretty good job of using it, us here. And as I've said before, it's a very good language for poetry, right? I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but I do know that I have a friend who's Korean American, and according to her, I could look this up more, but I'll just believe it because it sounds cool. According to her, there was some point in Korean history, there was an emperor who came in and he like scrubbed the language clean, brought in a linguist, a language expert, to make everything about the language streamlined and logical, right? So I don't know all of what that means, but if you think of the English words fate, fat, and father, we're pronouncing the same letter A 3 different ways. And then we even have words that, one that struck me the other day, oversight. The same word can actually mean two completely opposite things. As in, that was an oversight on my part, something I failed to notice. And we have to form an oversight committee to look into that, looking over things that were missed. So all this is to say, English can be terribly maddening and illogical for all its exceptions and everything. But all of that, on the other hand, makes it a good language for poetry. Muhammad Ali was once asked, they would ask him, give me a poem, give us a poem, give us a poem. And he said this one once. He just said, me, we. And that was the entire poem. Probably one of the shortest poems in English language, right? 4 letters, it's still a rhyme. It still expresses kind of a profound idea somehow in 4 letters. And so one of the shortest sentences I can say in English, it would be, think about it. I'm going to say go. G-O, period. With a possible tie with do. Except that in modern English, we would typically say do it, not just do. So, it's their language. So far, so good. And more to come.